Some people take the straight path in life. But at Arizona State University, we respect your twists and turns. They make our online students more driven to excel in their professional lives. That's why our personalized suite of services empowers you with innovative resources and staff that sticks with you. Make your next turn with one of our 300-plus programs at ASU, #1 in innovation for 9 consecutive years. Visit us at asuonline.asu.edu to learn more.
Ask me to name a type of scam, and I could go on for a very long time. There's phishing, romance scams, smishing, ransomware, spyware, and pig butchering. This is a relatively new type of scam, and it first caught my eye because of how vicious it is, as the name implies. I'm Allie, Komando.com content queen, and this is a special episode of Tech Refresh. I'm not here with Kim and Matt today talking about tech news and tips. Instead, I'm joined by Cezary Podkul, a reporter for ProPublica. He has done a ton of research on pig butchering, the victims, the people behind it, and how to recognize this crime before it happens to you. Cezary, do you think I'm right here? All the stories I read about pig butchering, this stuff is awful. And I'm talking about, both the victims and the people perpetuating the crime.
Yeah, it's a pretty awful phenomenon, and it's one that unfortunately is only getting worse. And it's one that is unique in that it has victims on both sides of the world. You have people who are being scammed out of their life savings all around the world, over 40 countries as far as we know. People have fallen victims to this scam. And then close to where I'm based in Southeast Asia, I'm here in Hong Kong, and from the reporting that I've done, a lot of these scams are coming out of scam sweatshops that are located across Southeast Asia, primarily in countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos.
Okay, before we keep using this term, pig butchering scam, it's a pretty rough thing to picture, just like it is an awful crime. So, Cezary, define this for us. What is a pig butchering scam?
Yeah, so it's a scamming technique, and the phrase comes from an analogy to farming. In the same way that a farmer might fatten up a hog before he butchers the hog for meat. The scammers try to fatten up their victims by gaining their trust and then convincing them to deposit larger and larger and larger amounts of money into fake investment platforms that they in fact control. So the way they do that is they chat you up, they make you believe that it's real, that you're talking to a real person, whether it's a potential romantic interest, someone you met on Tinder or some other dating app, or someone you met on LinkedIn, and maybe it's a potential professional contact. They basically get you to trust them so that when they very smoothly make the transition to investing, and then very smoothly talk about how successful they are, and then how they know what they're doing with crypto, it just all seems very natural and very real to you. And because of that, you then take their advice when they tell you, here's this website I signed up for, or this trading app you should download, and then you follow their advice. And then once you start actually depositing real money into the platform, then at some point they will allow you to withdraw a token amount. It could be a small amount, or it could actually, if you're depositing big amounts, could end up being a substantial chunk, just to convince you that it's real. And that one-time withdrawal has the effect of making you think, oh, it's got to be real because I took out money. I was able to take out money once, so I will be able to take out money later. And of course, that it ends up being, in retrospect, for many scam victims, a false assumption that they shouldn't have made, because that's part of the trick here, is to allow the victims, the scam victims, to withdraw, some portion of what they put in early on, so that they're convinced that it's real, and they'll be convinced to put in more and more money along the way. And of course, once they end up doing that, they get to a point where they have so much money, at stake, that they get worried. And so if they try to withdraw everything at once, that's when the scammers will, do the pig butchering. And what that means really is making the victims aware that actually you've lost control of your funds. You can't access them. If you want to access them, then the platform you've been investing into, or you thought you were investing into, it's going to ask you for this hefty fee. It could be a tax. Very often it's presented as a tax. So let's say you put in 100,000, and now that 100,000 is turned into 1 million, and of course the 1 million is just text on a screen. It's text that they manipulate. They make you think that it's real money, but in fact there's no money there. It's just they control all the numbers in the app or the website, but they make you think that there's $1 million there. So you put in 100,000, and now it's supposedly worth $1 million, and they might say you got to pay us 20% of the value of the portfolio as a tax in order for us to to give you back your money.
And I think most people think about a scammer, and it's like, yeah, it's this evil mastermind on the other side of the screen who's just pocketing all my money. But in many cases, it doesn't really work like that, does it?
With this scam, no, there's a unique twist on it, which is that this scam industry that's cropped up here in Southeast Asia is actually relying a lot on human trafficking to feed these scam sweatshops. So what that means is that they are basically paying human traffickers to recruit people, to fool them into thinking that they are signing up for a real job, often with vague job descriptions, such as marketing or sales job or something of that nature, and a very lucrative salary. And they reply to the ad, and before they know it, they're being trafficked, sometimes by boats, sometimes they just fly to the country where they're being trafficked to, or sometimes they get trafficked, smuggled overland to Cambodia or to Myanmar or Laos. And then when they end up there, they realize that it's not the marketing or the sales job that they signed up for. Actually, they're sat in front of a computer screen, and they're told from now on, you're a scammer. You have to learn how to talk to people, initiate conversations online with them, and basically get them to start trusting you so that they will begin depositing money into fake investment platforms that are used for these pig butchering scams. And so these people a lot of times aren't, of course, doing this willingly. It's just something that they themselves were tricked into. And that's why I say that there's victims on both sides of the world here. You have people who are fooled into and tricked into doing this in Southeast Asia against their will, and often they're desperate to get out. Sometimes they die trying to escape from these scam sweatshops, which can be quite brutal in the punishment they impose on the people who work there. And then in the U.S., to many of your listeners, you might be someone in California, Arizona, or wherever, and you just get a text message on your phone from a seemingly friendly stranger who's trying to initiate conversation with you. And all of a sudden just starts talking to you about investing in this amazing investment platform for cryptocurrencies. And if you believe them and you engage, that's how they hook you, and that's where the scam begins.
Yeah, so you wrote about a man named Yuen, and that is exactly how it started for him, right? I want to talk a little bit about the story because I think it's kind of the top level of like how bad this can get. So how did it start for him? Was it a text message, WhatsApp?
Yeah, it was just a message that
Okay.
showed up on his phone one day. And this is probably something that a lot of your listeners have experienced, that I have experienced it myself, and a lot of people that I know, friends, colleagues have told me, oh yeah, I'm getting these messages too. A lot of times, the typical script for them is to pretend you've got the wrong number. So they'll reach out to you and say, oh, hey, is this Larry? And you'll say, no, sorry, wrong number. Oh, I'm sorry, I have your number saved in my phone, and I was wondering who this was. And they'll just try to make it pretend that it was an honest mistake, and they're just a friendly person who's trying to get to know you. And then if you engage in that conversation, that's one way in. Another way in that I wrote in my article, in my investigation, was these fake profiles that they set up on all matters of social media. I mean, every imaginable platform out there, whether it's the classic big name social networking websites we've all heard about, like LinkedIn or Facebook, or dating websites, even niche websites like whether it's Tinder or Hinge, or various other dating websites. Even like I heard of a pen paling app where people are just kind of paired up with people to write letters to someone across the world and got kind of, in a fun way, get to know someone else around the world, or even a language learning app, really any sort of
Oh my gosh.
online app that connects people in different parts of the world, whether it's for romantic interests, professional, like LinkedIn, just general social networking, like, like Facebook, or, dating apps. They create fake profiles or certainly try to create fake profiles on all these platforms, and then they will initiate conversation with you that way. And then it kind of goes from there. So those, I would say, would be the two main avenues: either sort of the message that just shows up in your phone, or the social media profiles, the fake profiles that they create. And in the case of Ewan, the person we profiled in our investigation, in his case, it was just a message that just showed up in his phone one day and went from there.
Yeah, and so he engaged with that person. He started talking back, and he was at a really difficult point
Yeah.
in his life, right? His dad was in the hospital dying, and I mean, he's probably pretty vulnerable at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you think about your life, if you're at a point in life where maybe you feel, sad or depressed or lonely or some combination of those, and someone just pops into your phone and kind of brighten up your day and show you a lot of attention and cheer you up, you're gonna be more likely to keep talking with that person, right? It's sort of a useful escape at that point from the pains of daily life, especially if you have like in Ewan's case, a father in the hospital who's dying, and a lot of pressure at work which he was facing, and so these were things that sort of this kind of gave him a kind of a convenient sort of escape to just have a conversation with this stranger on the side that kind of allowed him to forget about the troubles of daily life. And that was, I think, why he originally engaged with the scammer. When the scammer pretended, oh, it's a wrong number, but let's just keep chatting, he kind of saw this as an opportunity to just get some relief from the stresses that he was experiencing in his daily life.
Well, and often these people are, they they make this money and they're good at this because they're charming. They create these profiles that are really, you look at it and you think, wow, I want to be like that. They're beautiful. They seem to have a ton of money. They're really kind of these captivating people, right? It's not just it's not some faceless, nameless person. They create these really in-depth profiles oftentimes, right?
Yeah, very much so. And so if it's a fake profile that the scammers have created on a dating website, then of course that dating website profile will be, full of gorgeous photos and a glamorous lifestyle and that kind of thing. Or in the case of Ewan, when they started engaging over WhatsApp, this stranger started sending him. She called herself Jessica, and she presented herself as a successful banker who claimed to work at, J.P. Morgan in New York. J.P. Morgan told me they had no employee who matched the details, of course, that this scammer provided him. So this was just a fake persona that the scammer created to convince Ewan that he was talking to a really smart, good-looking, successful person in New York who just wanted to get to know him because it's a pandemic, we're all kind of sitting at home bored, and it's sort of why not chat to a stranger. And then eventually it just sort of took a turn towards talking about investing, and from there talking about investing specifically by using cryptocurrencies.
Right. And so she, not too long into it, brought up her uncle, right, who was basically, she said, yeah, I'm kind of insider trading with my uncle, but I trust you. I want to bring you in on this because I think you can make some money. And I feel so bad for you because your dad's sick.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was the pressure point that the scammer was using. One thing that I want to point out to your listeners is that anything you say to a scammer, especially if it's a pig butchering scam situation like this, anything you say to a scammer can and will be used against you by the scammer. So any insights you give them into your personal life, what's going on with you, your childhood, your parents, your loved ones, whether you broke up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you're trying to buy a new house, trying to get a new job, or in the case of Ewan, his father is ailing in the hospital, in the last weeks of his life. Any information you share like that, that gives them crucial information for them to basically tailor their approach. Basically, at that point, the scammer is going to be triangulating this and thinking, okay, what's the best pitch we could use to try to rope him in? And in Ewan's case, it was the healthcare. Caring for his father was expensive. He had some older siblings that he wanted to take care of, and he found it convenient when this scammer mentioned that, hey, I can introduce you to a surefire crypto strategy that will surefire investment strategy using cryptocurrency. They were actually reporting to be investing in gold contracts, but anyway, if you do this, you'll make money, and it's all reward, no risk, and you'll be providing for your father and your siblings. So that was sort of the winning pitch in that situation. And as far as the script, you asked about the script of the rich uncle in Hong Kong. That turned out to be very much just that. It's a script. I saw these scripts and some documents that I reviewed. These are basically training manuals that are put together for the scammers that teach them how to engage with people, how to open conversations, how to make convincing arguments. And one of the classic scripts that they use is this tale. It's either a rich uncle or a rich aunt, depending on which script they're using and how they position it. It could be a rich uncle in Hong Kong, or it could be a rich aunt who, one case I saw, one script was an aunt who works at the Monetary Authority of Macau or something like that. Someone who's rich, knows what they're doing, works in finance, and they're willing to share advice with you. And in Yuan's case, it was this script about how she's got a rich uncle in Hong Kong who's feeding her insider quotes for the gold market. And if you follow Uncle's signals, you'll make money every time. And so that, of course, is a classic scamming script. Of course, he didn't know that at the time, but that's what the scammers were utilizing on him. And it was one of these classic pig butchering scamming scripts.
Yeah, so he started relatively small, right? He put in a few $1,000, but then, she got him to ramp it up pretty quickly.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I found that was most interesting about not just Yuan's case, but a lot of people I talked to. And his case is probably, one of the more extreme examples I came across. But the idea is that, these scams utilize a lot of psychological manipulation, which is the only way really to explain, how a person like him, he's a conservative, lifelong investor, a saver, someone who's been, saving money, socking it away, penny pinching, not taking big risks, only investing, mutual funds, not doing anything, risky or extravagant. And so he was petrified when the scammer suggested even putting in, just $10,000. Even that was, he was scared to even put that much. He was, scared to put in even 2,000, right? But she convinced him. And really, most likely it was he convinced him to go in with, I think it was 10,000 initially. And then that scaled up pretty quickly from like 10 to then 60 to over 100 to pretty soon he was $250,000 deep and then $500,000. So it scaled up pretty quickly, and it scaled up because the scammer was using these psychological manipulation tactics on him. On the one hand, to convince him he's doing the right thing for his father. And then also they were, showing him these fake results on this trading app that he was using that, of course, they controlled the entirety of all the numbers they were showing him. The numbers did look and feel real to him. And so he really did feel whenever he was depositing money that the money was being multiplied with each of these trades. And he was making, imagine, like if someone convinced you that in 5 minutes in a trade that lasts less than 5 minutes, you can make, $10, $15, $20,000, right? And then that's happening consistently every time this person tells you, hey, it's time to trade. If you believe that, you would be convinced to keep going. And he was convinced. He kept going, and that was one reason why the scammer, whenever she, broached the subject of, hey, put in more money, that was sort of the scammer was, at least initially pushing in an open door. He was willing to, move some money around and put more money in because he thought it was actually a winning investment strategy. And most of all, it just looked and felt very real to him.
Yeah. And by the end, how much money did Yuan lose?
All told, he burned through just over $1 million. And that was a combination of loans and family savings. Most of it, he said, was money that he and his wife had saved over, the last 30 years or so. So a lot of it was just burning through family savings. And then that was also, the pain was exacerbated by the fact that he took out a home equity loan, as we detailed in the story. So combination of just, really poor financial decisions that, again, he wasn't aware of at the time because he was being manipulated into the scam.
That's awful. And, certainly he's not alone. You said that a lot of the people you interviewed, they did lose their life savings, and maybe it wasn't as much as him, but, losing everything you've got to this kind of scam.
Yeah, it's always relative, right?
Yeah.
I talked to some people who might have lost only a couple of thousand, but they don't make a lot of money, right? And for them, a few $1,000s is just, an excruciating amount, right? Talk to other people who upwards of 2 million, or like a group of friends who lost like 3 million, altogether. Because the other thing that happens here is also the network effect. The scammers, one of the things they try to do to increase their paydays is if they've got a willing customer. Like, let's say that you are actively engaged in a scam, you believe it, you full on trust that it's real. They might tell you, hey, we've got, the brokerage we're using, they've got a deal now. And if you refer other customers, you get a bonus, right? And if you refer 2 of your friends, then they'll make some fake money show up in your fake brokerage and you think it's real. So you're like, oh man, let me loop in my uncle and then my sister, my brother, and then my brother's friend. And so I've seen some situations where this network effect takes on, and you have friends who convince some really important people, meaningful connections, friends, colleagues, family members. They convince them to do what really, in retrospect, once they realize it was a scam, amounts to being the single worst financial decision they ever made.
Yeah. All right, up next, I want to talk a little bit more about who's behind these scams and why they work so well. We'll be back on Tech Refresh. Welcome back to Tech Refresh. I'm Allie, and today I'm talking with ProPublica reporter Cezary Podkul about pig butchering scams. So let's talk a little bit more about the people behind these scams. Often when we talk about scammers, we don't feel sorry for the scammer, but in this case, it's really different because these are not people who are doing this because they're, evil masterminds trying to make money. They're people who got roped into this and are victims as much as the people who get scammed.
Yeah, that's one of the surprising things here. I mean, it's a crazy world we live in, right? But that is certainly what we found, and also from what other news organizations that have looked at this have found. When I traveled to Cambodia to do the reporting on this project, this is something I heard consistently, and then I met some of these human trafficking victims themselves who told me their stories of being held inside of these scam compounds. There's no better word for it really than compound. I mean, I went to some of the towns where these places are located, and they're just these large rectangular buildings with often adjoining casinos, and they have bars on the windows. They're often surrounded by barbed wire. They're heavily guarded. There's gates. There's luxury cars coming in. And no one seems to come out other than food delivery people when they deliver food. So they're almost like a military complex in a way. They're just very secretive, well guarded, barbed wire, bars on the windows, and everything. And those are the places where they say they were taken to and held and forced to scam. And they couldn't get out. Sometimes they would stage daring escape. Sometimes groups of people have broken out together and managed to stage really what amounts to like rebellions where just, large group of them might just try to break out together and, they overpower the guards. So it's a really crazy situation. And so that's sort of where this is happening. And again, a lot of these compounds are located in Cambodia, and I can explain later why that is and why that's sort of cropped up as a place where a lot of them have taken root. But a lot of them are also now moving to Myanmar, where a lot of these operations have also taken root. And then there's also a location in Laos where a lot of them are located also and operating out of there with seeming impunity. So this is sort of a regional problem here. Now, as far as the scamming itself, one thing to be mindful of is that while the industry utilizes and relies on this stream of human trafficking victims, the people who are fooled into thinking they're reporting for, a marketing job or something, general like that, that's going to pay them well and improve their lot in life. While they are used to initiate and carry on these scams, they aren't the sole participants in this. So beyond the human trafficking victims, their bosses, the agents, the people who hold them there against their will, they are also participating in this. And as we reported in our story, it's they often take over for them once they initiate contact, right? So the human trafficking victims are often they're the ones doing the kind of the low level grunt work, the sort of customer intake. They do call them customers or clients, the people that they're scamming. It's sort of the word that I've seen that shows up in the training manuals. They, when they're scamming you, they're referring to you as their client. And the reason these manuals exist is because if you think about it, if you trick a 22-year-old, Chinese man or woman to coming into, Cambodia, they have no idea where they're going. They have no idea what they're going to be doing. And if they're not a willing participant and they've never, done anything like this before, they're not going to be very good at it, right? And so that's why they have these training materials, indoctrination. They try to teach them and force them into really accepting this as their lot in life and, becoming a scammer. And some people do. Some of them decide, you know what, I can't go home. I'm stuck here. And if I don't do as I'm told, I'm going to get beaten, or sometimes they get punished with electric shocks. And so it's a very common punishment, unfortunately. It can be really brutal. And so some of them may decide to actually become willing participants in this cybercrime. And then others, are, the bosses above them. They're already doing it because they want to, not because anyone's forcing them to. So it's sort of it's kind of a continuum where you've got, on the one hand, you've got the people who are recruited and forced to do it, and they will do some of the initial contacting of people in the US, the UK, Germany, or wherever, to strike up conversations, build fake profiles, initiate contact via those profiles, get people interested in investing in the fake platforms. And then once the bosses, who are watching their every step, monitoring their communications, punishing them if they don't do as they're told, once the bosses see that, hey, this person here, he's actually got a live target, someone who's willing to engage and wants to deposit money into the fake platform, then the boss might take over and say, you know what, this is mine now, and I'm going to carry on the rest of this conversation. And I suspect that's what happened in Ewan with his case, because I think the psychological manipulation tactics that were employed on him were very expert, and I don't think that someone who just got to Cambodia would be able to do this level of sophisticated scamming if they've just got traffic to Cambodia from China, or if they got traffic to Laos or Myanmar or whatever, and they have never done this before. For them to be able to carry off such a large heist, to steal $1 million of someone's life savings, I think that takes a certain level of sophistication. So it is a team sport, and it's the bosses working in combination with the human trafficking victims that they're forcing to do this, and together perpetrating these scams and these crimes.
Yeah, I think you wrote in one of your articles that some of these victims do say, yeah, it felt like I was talking to multiple people, right? Like people kind of can pick up on that.
People can, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you were carrying on a text conversation, let's say with someone you met online, maybe you went on a dating website and you initiated a conversation with someone on a profile, and they kind of turn on a dime on you, right? Where one moment they're really friendly and happy, and then they're really like upset, and then another moment they get really moody or sort of sad or whatever, you might think, wait, am I talking this? Or they forget, or sometimes they'll forget, right? So they're moody, or they forget stuff. They forget you've already told them things. And unless it's just like a really sort of, unless you're dealing with someone who's just really forgetful or, extremely moody or whatever, you might detect that sounds like I'm talking to more than one person here. And in fact, that's a lot of times what does happen, right? Because you do have, it's like this team activity where the scammers are, working together, and the bosses are constantly supervising these human trafficking victims, looking at who are they talking to, how many lines of conversation have you had today, do you have enough lines of conversation, how many chats have you initiated, are you initiating enough chats, what are you telling them, why aren't you getting enough new contacts, right? So the bosses are always really monitoring these human trafficking victims very closely, minding what they're doing. And again, if they come across someone who looks like a really promising target, they'll take over. Or they might have a question for the boss. How should I deal with this situation? Someone's asking me a question that I've never had to deal with before, and the boss will come over and maybe they'll take over, start typing. So that's when you, as the person on the other side, the target of this activity, the victim, scam victim, you might detect, wait, am I talking to a few different people? And in reality, in fact, you are. So that's one clue. If you're trying to think about how not to get scammed, that is one piece of advice, I guess, that comes out of this, is if it sounds like, if you feel like something's wrong and you're talking to a group of people, chances are you might be in there trying to scam you.
Yeah, I do want to get more into those red flags. First, though, so you put out an article in September, I believe. Correct me on the timeline if I'm wrong, but you wrote about this in September, and then not long after that, there was a raid on one of these big trafficking sites, right?
Yeah, not just a raid, but raids plural. Yeah, just a bunch of them got raided by police in Sihanoukville, which is a coastal city in Cambodia, where a lot of these scamming operations have taken root. So the authorities started cracking down on this industry in Cambodia in serious fashion. Previous to our reporting, for months and months, authorities had been hearing about these scam operations. There have been local stories written, including by, I would point out VOD News, which is an outlet that has done terrific work covering this in Cambodia. And when I was there in May, we teamed up with a few of their reporters and contributors to look at some of these locations, including Scenicville, where these scams were happening. So they've done terrific work, and the government was aware that this was happening, but they were sort of denying it, trying to sweep it under the rug and pretend that it wasn't there. And I think with the weight of the evidence and all the stories that have been written by VOD, by us, and other news outlets, it just became a situation. And of course, the diplomatic pressure that was mounting on Cambodia to do something about this made it a situation that they couldn't ignore. So the government, the national police there, started seriously cracking down on these cyber criminal operations and going there to empty them out and actually taking seriously, people's cries for help. Sometimes, they established a hotline where people can, call to or seek out help from the government. So that sort of activity where they're both trying to shut down these scam operations, and they're also trying to help victims, people stuck inside. If someone's reporting that they're being held against their will, having a way to report that and try to help them, that together has helped improve things for people who were trafficked into this industry in Cambodia in recent weeks.
Yeah, you wrote about brothers who were trafficked, and they had multiple attempts of trying to contact the police and get out of there, and it just kept really falling apart. So it's good to hear that there's actually something, hopefully, that will work to help these people.
Yeah, definitely. So you're right. Previously, when these victims of human trafficking victims would reach out to police, it would be hard for them to actually get rescued, and often contacting authorities also created the risk that your bosses might find out. And then sometimes, of course, if they found out, they would get really upset. They might punish you. So that was a really risky situation. I think it's gotten a little bit less risky now. Hopefully, it's become a little bit easier for them to reach out to authorities and get help, because there's so much more attention being put on this now, and the government is actually, genuinely trying to do something about it. And so I think between those two factors, I think hopefully the situation's improved for people who are trying to seek help and get rescued.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the warning signs you need to watch out for to make sure that you don't fall for a scam like this. Welcome back to Tech Refresh. All right, Cezary, you've kind of sprinkled in some things that people need to watch for when they are talking to anyone online, really, but, especially if they get a message from someone, or if they're on a dating website, or like you said, even on a job site like LinkedIn. These kind of scammers can really target you anywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best advice I can give you, we've put it all actually into a very scrollable, shareable list. If you just Google "what's a pig butchering scam," hopefully the first link you'll see up there somewhere close to it will be our ProPublica guide. I wrote this around the time when we published our story, and it's really sort of the top 10 things to watch out for. And if I were just to kind of summarize a few of the top ones in terms of how these scams work and what to watch out for, is, probably the first thing is to be mindful that when someone contacts you out of the blue with these messages where they pretend it's a wrong number and then they try to get to know you, that's the first red flag you should watch out for, because that's a very common script that they use. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, be mindful if you do engage with the stranger on the other end, and you start talking with them. Be mindful that just like you wouldn't just start sharing information with on the street with someone you don't know. This person is at the end of the day a stranger, and they may be just lying to you about their identity, who they are, where they are, right? So just be mindful that anything you share with them, if they are a scammer, can and will be used against you. So again, if you share personal details about your life, your family, your situation, you're just giving them information, and they can turn around and use on you to try to psychologically manipulate you into depositing money into a fake investment platform. Another thing that you should watch out for is if they ask you to keep it a secret. That's always a red flag, because the reason they want you to keep it secret is because if there are people in your life, such as, let's say you're married, or you've got a girlfriend or boyfriend, if your spouse finds out that you're chatting with some attractive stranger online who all of a sudden is convincing you to deposit vast amounts of money, they might intervene, right? And so I don't know about you, but like if my wife found out that I was carrying on week-long conversation with a stranger and depositing our life's, large amounts of our savings, she would obviously, rip the phone out of my hand and I'd be in a lot of trouble. So that's the reason they tell you it's a secret, keep it a secret. So if they start telling you it's a secret, that's another red flag, right? Because the reason they're telling you that is because they don't want anyone in your life to intervene and cut it off, right? And if you tell your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband that you're, thinking of investing in this platform, chances are they might say, hey, it's a scam, right? Or they might Google our story or whatever and say, hey, that sounds like that pig butchering thing, right? So keeping it a secret is another red flag. And then if for some reason, you do end up engaging with them and it ends up going the wrong way and you do end up depositing some money, the best advice I can give you on that front, just from the reporting we've done, is to report it to the authorities, early on. Even if you're not altogether 100% convinced that it is a scam, it's in your advantage. It's to your advantage to report it to the police and authorities as soon as you can. When I say authorities, not just your local police, but also report it to the U.S. Secret Service, which investigates these types of financial crimes, the FBI, as well as the Federal Trade Commission has a site where you can report consumer fraud, right? And so a lot of these reports end up in that database, and they're very useful and helpful to law enforcement as well, because they use that to spot trends and help investigations. So you're not only helping yourself by reporting there, but also helping others who may be in a similar situation. And so reporting that will help them, and it may help you, because if it does turn out that it is a scam, then the sooner you report it, the sooner authorities can try to act on that, to try to freeze the funds, to try to trace, first of all, where the funds went, and then try to do a freeze and asset forfeiture proceeding and try to get you back the money. And there have been some situations, they're still quite rare, but it does happen, where prosecutors are able to trace the funds, freeze them, and do an asset forfeiture proceeding to try to get you your money back. Prosecutors at the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office, I think, have had the most luck with this. They're working with a special task force there that's been able to do this and has had some success seizing assets linked to pig butchering scams. But as Erin West, the deputy district attorney there who's handling this, told us for our story, she said we're definitely going to be able to be more successful if you immediately report, because the money's always on the move, right? So the scammers, when they take your money, they're moving it, and it goes into the money laundering machine, and they start moving it across the world to different places, between different crypto wallets. So because your money's always on the move, the sooner you report, the easier it is. And I shouldn't say easier, because it's never easy, but it's relatively going to be a little bit easier for them to try to trace and recover funds that have just been moved into a scammer's wallet, a day or two ago, as opposed to 6 months or certainly 12 months from now, right? So the earlier report, the better your chances of actually getting a recovery. And same thing with banks. I talked to one person who was able to get one of her bank transfers reversed, because she realized just in the nick of time that it was a scam, and she notified her bank, and the bank was able to undo the transaction. But that was only because she very quickly, within I think a day or so of doing the transaction, she notified the bank that, hey, this is a scam. Can you please reverse this? And they were able to do that. So the sooner you report, the sooner you act on it, the better chance you have of recovering some of your funds.
Yeah, the hard part there is, I think a lot of people, if they get mixed up in something like this, even with low-level scams, I think people get embarrassed and they don't want to admit that they got fooled. They don't want to say, this happened to me. Is that something that you came across in your reporting? People who were just afraid to speak up?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I think, the main thing to say there is just, you're not alone, right? It's something that has happened to thousands of people around the world with this, explosion of cybercrime out of Southeast Asia linked to these pig butchering scams. And there's a lot of other scams, as well, that they're kind of spearheading out of there. This is, I think, one of the most common ones, and the one that's sort of spread most internationally now, this pig butchering variety. But there's a lot of scams right now online that are spreading and are targeting people in different places in different ways. And so, by all means, you're definitely 100% not alone if you are being contacted by someone who wants to scam you, because I think we've all gotten those messages at this point, or know someone who has. And certainly, if you engage with the person, and if it ends up going to a place you didn't expect, to actually end up depositing some money, into these fake platforms. You're certainly not the only one. There's an organization called the Global Anti-Scam Organization, which is like a victim support group that has members, I think, I think something like, certainly over a dozen countries, where people have fallen victim to these scams, and they've reported being victims of pig butchering scams. And so they've got sort of a network of people around the world in many different countries who have been scammed. So you're definitely not alone if you fell victim to one of these scams.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be back on Tech Refresh. Welcome back to Tech Refresh. I'm Allie, and today I'm talking with ProPublica reporter Cezary Podkul about pig butchering scams. Well, is there one thing I was thinking about? So a lot of this happened kind of during the height of the pandemic, right? When people were maybe spending a lot more time alone or at home, were lonely. And I think as kind of cryptocurrency was becoming more accepted, people were seeing, oh my gosh, these people are making so much money in crypto. And I know these scams take all types of, different routes where it's you're investing in gold or this or that. But do you see, I guess, kind of the method behind these pig butchering scams changing as, people are spending more time outside their homes? Maybe they're a little more leery of cryptocurrency. Do you think this kind of scam will shift?
Oh yeah, well, it's constantly evolving. Yeah, I mean, even in the time that I was doing my reporting, I saw the tactics shifting. Let me give you just one concrete example that would illustrate that. When I first started talking to victims of the scam, so not the human trafficking victims, but the scam victims in the US and Canada, I interviewed some people in like 7 different countries, close to 30 people who lost money to this variety of scam. And when I first started talking to them, I was hearing, mostly, that when they would try to engage with these people to, if they thought that they were real, first of all, you would do like you would always do with any other person in your life, you would try to verify and make sure that they're real, right? So if someone is going to pretend they like you and they want to date you and their romantic interest, like let's say if it goes the romantic route, they would ask them to call them like, hey, why can't we talk? Can we have a phone conversation? Can we just chat? And the scammers would always come up with an excuse. No, I can't. Either, like I'm busy, I can't. Or a common excuse was, my English isn't very good. And because English isn't my first language, I feel very shy and I don't want to talk to you. Or some other excuse like, some traumatic experience involving, a video chat that went wrong and therefore they're scared of ever doing a video chat, whatever. So they would make up excuses. They wouldn't do anything other than text. So everything was done by text, and sending photos and, fake exploring and showing off that fake persona using images and text and maybe a voice memo here and there. And then as I was wrapping up my reporting, someone shared with me this really interesting case where the scammer was actually doing completely the opposite. So they were the scam syndicate that was operating this scam. It was a very similar kind of pig butchering scam, but in this case, they were very willing to chat on video and put a real person in front of you. The real person, of course, was working for the scam syndicate. She was a woman that they had recruited to do the scam and try to convince you that she is a real potential love interest of yours, and if you do as she says, you'll make a lot of money, right? And so,
Wow.
in some cases, they might actually, they've shifted tactics, at least in that sense, where, as the pandemic has ebbed and things have opened up, and we're kind of coming back to more real life interactions, and there's maybe less desperation for us to, we feel so lonely that we'll just chat with anyone because now we can go out with friends and whatever. They've sort of shifted where they will actually engage with you on video, and they might actually put a real person on video to talk with you. And that could still be a scam. So don't think that just because they're willing to have a video call with you, that means they're real. The video call itself could be part of the scam. So I guess that's the main thing to watch out for. These scams are constantly evolving. They're constantly getting more sophisticated. And at the end of the day, the main reason they're so effective is because they try to do as much as they can to make it look and feel very real. Just to go back to the person, we started the segment with, Ewan, when I asked him, like, why it took a turn like this and why why in the end he ended up depositing so much money into this scam, it was a very simple answer. He was just absolutely convinced it was real. He just didn't have a sliver of a doubt for the longest time that it was fake, and that's what they're doing now is they're trying to innovate by doing new and different ways of making it look and feel real. And one of them certainly appears to be to actually put a person on a video call to try to engage with you and convince you that there's a real person on the line, even if the other person on the other line is working for a scam syndicate that wants to, cheat you out of your money.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So we know if someone reaches out with a text message or a WhatsApp message or whatever it is and says, how did I get your number? We're going to block that person. We are not going to engage. And then, yeah, that's rough that, it could be someone that you are doing, video chats with, voice memos, a phone call, whatever it is. And so I guess the best advice there is if it's someone you've never met before and they are trying to give you secret investing advice, I'm going to say 99 point something% a scam. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a fair assessment.
All right. Cezary, thank you so much for joining us today. This is great stuff. And I think that, this is a really good service you're doing, helping people see, you could lose your entire life savings. And, you've talked to a lot of people who that's happened to. So tell people again where they can find your work.
Sure. So to read more of our work, go to ProPublica.org. That's ProPublica.org. And if you're interested, if you want a quick way of finding our story, just Google "what's a pig butchering scam" and ProPublica, and you should see that. It'll be the top link that has everything you need to watch out for to avoid falling victims to these scams. And that also links to my investigation, which gives you an in-depth read of sort of everything that's behind these scams and why they've exploded and become such a big menace.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Tech Refresh. We'll see you next time.